Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dogs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I am your host during this afternoon, and it is a privilege of mine to be able to talk to you about the 2025 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers today. And we're going to be covering a ton on the show here at Dodgers Dogs. It was an epic day in the city of Los Angeles. Obviously, today was the parade celebration for the Los Angeles Dodgers winning back-to-back World Series championships. And we saw a ton of great things from the buses going down the streets, going down the highways, to the Dodgers arriving in Dodger Stadium, all of the interviews, all of the scenes and stuff from Ice Cube bringing out the World Series championship to all of the celebration and just a sense of joy. So many of you had the privilege to be able to either watch it or be there in person for either one of these events. And it is a privilege that the Dodgers have been given us because of the success that they have. In the parade, there was one common theme that just about every single player, every single person, every single one that was there emphasized. They are not satisfied with back-to-back 2 World Series championships in a row. The quest for a three-peat starts now. Welcome to the offseason. We're going to be covering the offseason here at Dodgers Dogs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. This show is going to be a incredibly important show because while the World Series is over, while the season of baseball in 2025 is over, the business of baseball never stops, which means there are imminent decisions that the Dodgers have to make in order to go ahead and do business appropriately over the next couple of weeks. There are important decisions that they're going to have to make, and they're going to have to start constructing the roster that will help them repeat in 2026 and get that third World Series championship in a row. The groundwork starts now. It's not a wait until spring training to start in order to help your team go out there and win a World Series championship. For the front office and for the organization, the groundwork starts right now, which means we're going to have to go dive into a lot of technicalities with this roster. We're going to have to do a full overview of where each one of these players are at. Now, with the show that we're going to have today, and with the show I'm also going to have tomorrow, because this is actually just part 1 of the off-season talk that we're going to go through. Part 2 will be had tomorrow at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, where I'm going to be at. We're going to be going into different aspects of the organization. I'm going to try to go through as much of this as I possibly can. Today is going to be focused more on who is actually on the roster for the Dodgers and what decisions are they going to have to make, some of which they're going to have to make within the next couple of days, others of which within the next couple of weeks, before they can even think about adding free agent additions. So I know a lot of you guys are going to be curious, who is the outfielder the Dodgers are going to target? Or who is this next star player the Dodgers could add to this team to try to help them win a three-peat? We got to put a little bit of pause in that, and we have to look at the roster where it's at right now, because it would be a disservice to each one of these players that is within the organization not to give them their due credit and actually evaluate, one, the talent of where they are at, and what the numbers actually say for each one of these players, and how they're going to best fit in to a 2026 Los Angeles Dodgers roster. The journey to go ahead and win a World Series starts right now, and we're going to go ahead and break down each and every part of it. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in as part of this show. It's going to be an absolutely fun show for you guys. I will not get to as many comments as I'm used to in the show, just because there's going to be a lot of technicality and there's going to be a lot of explanations. Also, by the way, if you feel like I'm repeating myself with some of the technicalities, that's somewhat on purpose, because I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page for what is needed throughout the course of the offseason, so that if you're new to the game of baseball or perhaps a brand new Dodgers fan, you can actually understand what is going on behind the scenes at the front office level. So thank you very much for tuning in. I know we have a big chat right now. Bruce Davis, thank you very much for joining us. Justin Lamas, CNAV, Kristen Rivero, Showtime LA, Mr. Classic, Carol S., Al Minerva, all joining us in the comment section. feel free to have a conversation in the comment section right now. What you think about the Los Angeles Dodgers winning back-to-back World Series championships. Also, if you're at the parade, let us know down in the comment section and actually talk about your experience that you had at the parade. I'd love to be able to read back. I will read through each one of these comments after the show is over. I think YouTube gives us 12 hours delay in the live chat being able to go back and review them. So I will go back and review each one of these comments or the comments that you leave down in the comment section. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the roster. And what we have is I have created, and this is something I've been working on for the past couple of weeks, I've created an Excel sheet that we're going to be utilizing going over the next couple of days. Sounds a little bit nerdy, but it's going to really help us out. If you were around during the last Welcome to the Offseason show that we did about this time last year, after the day after the parade is when it was. I was listening back to that today. Actually, the most viewed live stream that we've ever done. So thank you for doing that. We utilize an Excel sheet. I've made some upgrades to this, and we're going to have additional information that we're going to dive into as we go through what the Dodgers need to do this offseason. So without further ado, we're going to switch over to this Excel sheet, and we're actually going to cut first to important dates that we need to know as Dodgers fans. So this is over the course of the next month and a half or so, important dates that are going to be had for the Dodgers. So first things first, the trade market is officially open. Right after, and I think it's like 30 minutes after the World Series ends, teams are allowed to trade players for each other, which I believe there was already a minor trade. I don't remember what the two teams were, but there was a minor trade that already took place today. That is open, which means right now the Dodgers, as we speak, could be making a trade at this very moment. Trades are open. However, free agency is not officially open. Free agency will open up in a couple of days, I believe on November 6th, if I got it right. It's 5 days after the World Series officially ends. It ended on the 1st, so I believe that would put it on the 6th. Here's what's really crucial to know about the 6th, and the areas where it's highlighted are crucial days for the Dodgers to keep in mind. For example, November 6th is also the day to offer qualifying offers for players. This is a 1 year, about $20-some million deal to certain players if they are really good. What that benefit does to an organization is that nets you a draft pick if they sign with another organization. For the Dodgers, we'll go over their free agents. I do not believe they are in a position to offer anybody the qualifying offer, so I am not highlighting that as an important date because I don't think it's relevant to the Dodgers this year. What is relevant is on November 6th, they have to make a determination as far as their club options, player options, mutual options, or vesting options. This is the deadline for that. Where this impacts the Dodgers, it impacts them with two specific players, one of which is more important than the other, not because one player is better than the other, but because it has different implications for each player. So I'll talk about the first one. The first one is obvious. It's Max Muncy. Max Muncy has a $10 million club option that the organization has to decide by the 6th. We're talking about Thursday. They have to decide by Thursday whether or not they want to pick up Max Muncy's option for the 2026 season. It is a club option, which means the organization has sole decision as to whether or not they want to pick up his option. I fully anticipate the organization picking up Max Muncy's option. He has been an incredibly valuable player for the team, and you look at his numbers in comparison to many of the other third basemen in the game of baseball, and they are right up there with some of the best third basemen out there, especially if you keep in mind that Max Muncy has been injured for a large part of the past 2 seasons. Even so, with that, he's still able to put up really solid numbers. He fits incredibly well within this clubhouse, and just $10 million for him entering his age, I can't remember if it's 35 or 36 season. I think this is a no-brainer for the organization. I think you're going to see at least one more year of Max Muncy. There might be a little bit of a different conversation this time around next offseason, but for now, for just $10 million, I think that's something that they're going to do. Remember last offseason, club options were Miguel Rojas and Austin Barnes, and they picked up both of their options. Both of their options were, I can't remember, they were like $3 to $5 million. So if you're talking about just a little bit more than that with Max Muncy, I think that is a easy decision for the organization to make. Pick up the $10 million club option. And if you don't like Max Muncy, if you want Max Muncy to not be a Los Angeles Dodger, having a third baseman as good as he is on a 1-year, $10 million deal is as valuable as any third baseman contract in the game of baseball, or arguably as valuable as any third baseman contract in the game of baseball, in which you could make an argument, hey, let's pick up the option, but then let's look at trading him. I don't think that's a wise move. I think they keep with Max Muncy, but I think this is an easy decision for an organization to make. Another decision the organization's going to have to make is they also have a club option. I think it's $3.65 million to Alex Vesia. That's going to be due on the 6th. What makes that situation different? First off, prayers for Alex Vesia and for the entire situation. We continue to think about him and his family. What makes that situation a little bit different is Alex Vesia is still arbitration eligible, which means as a technicality, first off, let's define arbitration eligible for those who aren't aware. For the first 3 years of service time, players are under the league minimum amount of money that they are due. After a couple of years, they enter into what's called the arbitration years. These are negotiated rates based on how well a player performs between the team and the player, and it's dependent based off of performance. So if you're a better performing player, for example, with Juan Soto, by the end of his arbitration years, he was making close to $30 million a year versus somebody like and just off the top of my head, like an Anthony Banda last year made $1 to $2 million a year, not because of and they were not at the exact same year of arbitration, but it's dependent on the amount of success that you've had throughout those years. Alex Vesia is going to be due, I believe, a club option of $3.65 million, which means that the Dodgers can go ahead and exercise that club option. That would be my anticipation, especially with everything that's going on. I don't think they want to enter any sort of negotiation process with Alex Vesia. I think that would not be good for the organization at all. But if they decide to decline that club option, what makes that different from Max Muncy is Max Muncy would immediately become a free agent on the 6th of November and could sign with any team because Alex Vesia is still under the arbitration process. If the Dodgers decided to decline his club option, they would re-enter the negotiation process as if he was arbitration eligible because he would still be under team control. I think I have that situation right. So the important thing about the 6th, they have to make sure that they pick up Max Muncy's club option. They likely have to exercise Alex Vesia's club option. And then free agency begins. The 6th of November is when free agency is going to begin. This is where all of the signings and all of the upgrades that you can start making to your team can start making place. Which means that we're having the Welcome to the Offseason show the day of the parade because the baseball season never stops. The business of baseball never stops, I should say. Then throughout the year, you have different meetings between general managers. That's happening from the 10th and to the 13th. And then the 18th to the 20th is owners' meetings that they are having. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions that they're going to be having, especially in anticipation for next offseason when there is very much going to be, there's a lot of rumors about there potentially being some sort of, there's a lot of stuff that's going on next offseason, especially with potential strike that's going down and all the talk about the salary cap and all that stuff. We're not going to talk about that today, but I'm sure that's going to be discussion in those meetings. On the 18th is when the deadline for players to accept the qualifying offer. Again, that doesn't really impact the Dodgers, but the 18th is also the day in which the Dodgers have to add players to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. The Rule 5 draft, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is a way to be able to help players that are stuck within an organization and not getting opportunities at the MLB level to get opportunities with another organization. So, in the more technical terms, which again, I'm explaining this for people who are new to the game of baseball or new Dodgers fans, in a more technical sense, you have a 26-man roster and a 40-man roster. 26-man roster are players that you have on your major league club. But you don't just have those 26 players. You have a 40-man roster, which includes 14 other players that are either on the injured list or down at the minor league level. For the Rule 5 draft, these are for players that are on neither the 26-man roster nor the 40-man roster. These are for specifically players that are at the minor league level, that have been there for a certain number of years and are not getting any opportunities. This is their chance to be able to have an organization look at them and say, we're going to take you and we're going to add you to our 26-man roster for the entire year. Doesn't happen to a ton of players. It's about 15 to 20 players a year, but it does happen, and the Dodgers have a lot of talented players as part of their system. The 18th is the deadline to be able to add those players to your roster. 21st is the deadline for teams to tender contract to players under team control. This is for players on your roster. If you want to offer them a contract for the next year, this is the deadline to do so. The 8th through the 11th is the winter meetings. 9th is the MLB draft lottery. And then December 10th, the event of all events, is the Rule 5 draft. When this actually takes place, players could be taken from the Dodgers farm system. So, with all that said, and everything that we have, those are the important dates to keep in mind. So this begs to question, what is the actual state of the Los Angeles Dodgers roster? Where are the Dodgers at, and what moves do they have to do, especially with Max Muncy needing his club option picked up? What is the organization at in order to, following the World Series, what is the fallout of the roster and where it's at? That's what we're going to look at right now in just a second. If I can go ahead and get this plug pulled over. One thing to keep in mind, this Excel sheet will be available, but it won't be available until after the show tomorrow. You'll see why on the show tomorrow, because there is some additional coverage that we're going to have that I don't want to reveal just quite yet. So if you were familiar or were around for last year's show, this should look at least a little bit familiar to you guys. So just to let you guys know what this is the roster and where it's at right now following the World Series. So anybody who's in green is going to be a pitcher. Those who are in orange are going to be a position player or a catcher or whatever. Purple is Shohei Ohtani because he can do both. Same rules as last year. What we have as part of the roster right now, actually, let's go to free agents and let's go to one player who is retiring as well. So, as part of the roster that is currently on the roster but won't be on the roster within a matter of days, Clayton Kershaw. Now, Clayton Kershaw is retiring, and he's retiring on top. As he said during the event today, he is going out as a champion. He will forever be a champion. It was a tremendous, legendary career, and there's there's not enough good things to be able to say about the career that Clayton Kershaw had in a Dodgers uniform. I hope that he has an absolute wonderful retirement going forward, and he is going to be cheering on the Dodgers going forward. He will, however, not be part of the 2026 Los Angeles Dodgers. Some of the players that are free agents: Andrew Heaney. Remember, Andrew Heaney was added late in the season as a more depth piece. He is going to be a free agent after this year. Came into that game against the Mariners and ended up starting a game, was part of the organization, is going to be entering free agency. He's the lone starter that's going to be a free agent. Two bullpen arms that are going to be free agents: Michael Kopech, who had a little bit of a disappointing year, but if you remember, the impact that he had in 24 was absolutely tremendous. And then Kirby Yates, who obviously, disappointing year for him. He is going to be a free agent. Two guys, there's going to be a lot of discussion that we're going to be having over the course of the next couple of weeks on each one of these guys. Kike Hernandez and Miguel Rojas are free agents. What they decide to do with each one of these guys is going to be a question mark going forward. I think the expectation from a lot of Dodgers fans is that they will be back at some point. However, when looking at the math of the roster, neither of them are counted in this math because both of them are now going to be free agents, allowed to sign with any team possible. Miguel Rojas has made statements that he is planning on retiring after the 2026 season, which means he is thinking about going out there for one more season. We'll see. The obviously World Series heroics that Miguel Rojas had were tremendous. Unbelievable what he was able to do. there should be a lot of interest from the organization bringing him back. And Kike Hernandez speaks for himself with what he's able to do. Absolutely hilarious at the event today with all of the interviews and with his speech that he had. He is an absolute character. Both important leaders in the Dodgers clubhouse. Do they want to keep those guys as leaders in this clubhouse, or do they want to move in a different direction? It's very difficult to say that they want to move in a different direction, given that with both of them in the organization, they have won back-to-back World Series champions, and they talk about how important their leadership is. That's going to be a crucial decision for the Dodgers to make. If they add them onto the roster, there's going to have to be moves on the roster over there. And then Michael Conforto, obviously a very disappointing season for him. He is not going to be on the Dodgers roster, or at least I'm not anticipating him being on the Dodgers roster next year. What's going to be really curious for the organization is who do they actually target as the replacement for Michael Conforto? Because while Michael Conforto did not work out as a player, the role in which he had, meaning a left-handed bat for the outfield, you're going to see in a little bit, is going to be incredibly crucial for this Dodgers team to figure out and find that player. I don't think it's going to be Michael Conforto. He is a free agent, but that is going to be a decision the Dodgers are going to have to make. Which means those are the players currently on the roster that are moving on. Now, let's look at the roster, because the roster right now has 41 different players on it. You say 41, how do they get to 41? Another technicality for those of you who don't know, there are certain players that throughout the course of the season, meaning from the start of spring training to the end of the World Series, there are certain players that can be added onto what's called the 60-day injured list. What the 60-day injured list is, it's a list for players that are going to be out for at least 60 days of the season. Now, if we look at this year for the Dodgers as far as players that have been injured, let's actually look at this list of injured players, because there are currently 7 players that fit this criteria as far as either being injured right now or coming back from significant injury. And this is not including the full list even of players. For example, Kyle Hurt isn't part of this list, but he certainly fits the mold of this. Tony Gonsolin missed a vast majority of the year. He's still currently on the roster. Will have to be added to the 40-man roster and taken off the 60-day injured list. River Ryan missed the entire season. Gavin Stone missed the entire season. Those are 2 incredibly talented right-handed arms in this organization. Brusdar Graterol, obviously when he's healthy, is extraordinary out of the bullpen. Michael Grove, another really solid depth arm for the Dodgers to have. Evan Phillips, incredible when he is on the field. And then Brock Stewart, really good at getting right-handed hitters out, was the trade deadline target for the Dodgers. There's a lot of these players that were on the 60-day injured list that now have to be added back onto the roster, which means that the math for the roster currently is at 41 players. Now, this 41 comes with a little bit of an asterisk because I'm counting Max Muncy on this roster. We'll go through this entire list in just a second just to make sure the math picks out. I'm assuming that the organization is going to pick up the club option for Max Muncy because I think that is the smartest move for the organization to make. So, who is on this 40-man roster right now? We'll go through this entire list, then we'll go through each one of the players and how it all stacks out. I have a little bit of a better version of this that we can turn to in just a second. For the starters, in alphabetical order, we have Tyler Glasnow, Tony Gonsolin, likely to be out a large chunk of the 2026 season. Landon Knack is on the roster. River Ryan coming back from injury. Roki Sasaki have him currently listed under the starters, just in anticipation for 2026. You could have him as part of the bullpen, though. Emmett Sheehan, really solid year. Blake Snell, Gavin Stone coming back from injury. Justin Robleski, currently have him as a starter depth option. And then Yoshinobu Yamamoto. For the bullpen, Anthony Banda, Ben Kasperius, Jack Dreyer, Nick Frasso is on this roster. Paul Gervais, who came over from the Adam Sermanowski trade from Tampa Bay, has got incredible swing and miss stuff down at the minor league level. He's on the roster. Brusdar Graterol's coming back. He's going to be on the roster. Michael Grove, Edgardo Henriquez, Kyle Hurt coming back from injury. Will Klein, obviously the legend of Will Klein. Bobby Miller, still part of this roster. Evan Phillips, Tanner Scott, obviously very disappointing 2025. You look at the numbers before that, they are incredible. So they're hoping that he, because of the large contract that he has, is able to come back and have some success. Brock Stewart as well. Blake Trinan is going to be on the roster. Remember, last year he signed a 2-year deal, which was a big decision that the organization decided to make. And then Alex Vesia. There's also Shohei Ohtani, two-way player extraordinaire. For the catchers, Will Smith, Ben Rortvedt is currently on the roster, and Dalton Rushing. We're going to be having a lot of conversation as far as Ben Rortvedt versus Dalton Rushing going forward, and really what the future is for Dalton Rushing. Infielders, Mookie Betts, Tommy Edman, Alex Freeland's on this roster, Freddie Freeman, Hae-Sung Kim, and Max Muncy. And then outfielders, Alex Call, Justin Dean, Teoscar Hernandez, Andy Pages, and Esteury Ruiz, which means that if the organization decides that they want to go ahead and add a Max Muncy to this roster, they're going to be over the limit by one player. This is without adding any sort of outfielders, without adding any sort of relief pitching help, or without even adding any of the guys that are eligible for the Rule 5 draft, which will be coming up, and they will have to make a decision on the 18th. Which means there's going to have to be some difficult decision, at least one difficult decision the organization is going to have to make within the next couple of days, because, I mean, you look up and down this roster, unlike a lot of other organizations, there's not a whole lot of names that the Dodgers want to move off of or think it's a great thing to move off of. And no, you can't just move off of each and every single one of the minor league guys, because remember, there's a 26-man roster and a 40-man roster. If you sign 26 players that have major league contracts, every single person that has minor league options has to spend the time at the minor league level and wait for somebody to get injured. That is the difficulty of the roster. You have to have a combination of major league players and minor league players that can play at the major league level and that can help supplement the roster throughout the entire season, which means that the organization is going to have to make a difficult decision as far as who to move off of very shortly. To break it down a little bit further of those 41 players, let's break it down by this. What we have right here is we have starters, we have bullpen options, we have injured players that are injured, but also have 0 minor league options. We have optionable starters, and we have optionable relievers. So this is the pitching outlook for the Dodgers going into the 2026 season. So we have, remember, and with this, what we're going to do is we're going to have for this, we're not going to be counting Shohei Ohtani as part of this mix. And so if you actually look at the starters, it's going to be the number of starters -1, because Shohei Ohtani is such a unique player, does not count towards the number of pitchers that you have. So currently, if you look at guys that are either have to be on the major league roster, or it would be inexcusable to keep them off the 40-man or off the major league roster, the only player that I listed with that, or listed with that, I think are Emmett Sheehan and Alex Vesia. I think both of them technically still have minor league options. However, with their performances they had this past season, it would be a humongous shock to see either of them not on the roster. If they keep the players that they have on the roster, they have Tyler Glasnow, Shohei Ohtani, Emmett Sheehan, Blake Snell, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto as starters. And then for the bullpen, Anthony Banda, Tanner Scott, Blake Trinan, and Alex Vesia. That counts as 8 of the 13 players you can have. I know it's technically 9. You can say it's 9 of the 14 pitchers that you can have on your roster, but that leaves 5 open spots that you can have on your roster. And that's assuming that none of these guys are coming back from injury with any sort of quickness. And that also means that all of these guys, including guys like Roki Sasaki, Gavin Stone, River Ryan, Justin Robleski, the legend Robo, Jack Dreyer, Ben Kasparius, Edgardo Henriquez, Kyle Hurt, all of these guys, this is assuming that they're going to start the season at the minor league level. There's 5 open spots. Now, you can add in a couple of these guys, but that shows you some of the limit, at least right now, of where this roster is on a pitching side. Now, pitching side is a lot easier to work out because of the injuries that happen throughout the course of the season to fill in some of these spots, but this is where the roster is right now. You have a lot of optionable starters, you have a lot of optionable relievers. One thing to note, and this is going to come up, especially when we talk about the Rule 5 draft coverage, there is only one optionable reliever that is a left-handed option if you don't include Justin Robleski. If you include Justin Robleski, it's 2. But that's very limited in comparison to some of the right-handed arms. There's actually a couple of left-handed relievers that are going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft that have succeeded at the AAA level that could be an option for the Dodgers to turn to. We'll get to some of those names in just a little bit. But this is what the pitching side of things looks like. What about the offense? And how does this look like? This is what the offense looks like. Currently, there are 9 position players that have to be on the major league roster, or it would be very hard to imagine them not on the major league roster entering into the next year. The only one that is a little bit of a question mark about is Ben Rortvedt. However, they're either going to have Ben Rortvedt or Dalton Rushing be their backup catcher, which means the spot is already going to be filled. I put Ben Rortvedt right there only because he has 0 minor league options, and if the Dodgers decided to hold on to him, he has to be on the major league roster, in which case Dalton Rushing has to be at AAA or take up an additional roster spot. So, the 9 position players that are going to be part of this roster: Shohei Ohtani, Will Smith, Mookie Betts, Tommy Edman, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Teoscar Hernandez, and Andy Pages. Yes, I still have Andy Pages on here. We will be talking about him in just a little bit. These are the guys that are currently on your roster. Remember, you can have 13 position players, which means there's going to be 4 open spots. And this is going to get filled up incredibly quickly, especially if you want to add players like a Miguel Rojas and a Kike Hernandez to this mix. If you add both of them, that's 11 of the 13 spots. Without adding an extra outfielder, without having guys like an Alex Freeland or a Ha-Seong Kim, or even a guy like an Alex Call be part of the roster, which reality is very likely that Alex Call probably going to be on the major league roster next year, which means that if you add, and this is something we're going to be talking about in a little bit, if you add both Kike Hernandez and Miguel Rojas part of your mix, it's very likely that both Ha-Seong Kim and Alex Freeland are going to be minor league depth options in this organization. We'll get to there in just a little bit. This is what the overall roster looks like. However, and this is when I want to break it down a little bit further, let's look at players that are under contract, because there are under contract players, there's arbitration eligible players, and there's pre-arbitration players. The players under contract are the players that are making the big amounts of money. These are the players that get the large contracts by the organization. Those include Tyler Glasnow, Blake Snell, Yamamoto. Tanner Scott is under contract for 3 more years. Blake Trinan and Alex Vesia for 1 more year. I think Alex Vesia actually should be in the arbitration eligible criteria. Technically, Shohei Ohtani, even though he's got a club option as part of that. Shohei Ohtani's got 8 more years left. Will Smith, 8 more years. Mookie Betts, 7 more years on his contract. Tommy Edman has 4 more years, plus a club option, I believe. Freddie Freeman, 2 more years left. Ha-Seong Kim, 2 years, plus 2 options, and 2 option years as well. When it says OPT, that's the number of option years the player has. Max Muncy, assuming the Dodgers pick up his club option, has 1 more year, and Teoscar Hernandez has 2 more years. Players that are arbitration eligible: Tony Gonsolin. If we're talking about, and I think he's going to be a key player that we're going to be talking about as far as creating roster spots going forward. We'll get to that a little bit later. Anthony Banda, 2 arbitration years, but 0 minor league options. Bruce Dark-Greitels got 1 more arbitration eligible year. Michael Grove, 3 arbitration years. Evan Phillips, 1. Brock Stewart, 2. Ben Rortvedt has 3 more years, but 0 minor league options. Alex Call, 4 years left of arbitration, 4 years left of team control. It's 2 options. And Esteury Ruiz, I don't know technically how many years he has left. A couple more years, 1 minor league option. And then you get the pre-arbitration. These are actually the contracts that, especially if you have players that are productive in this category, allow you to get more players that are under the larger term contract, because these are the players that really help your organization as a whole. Include Landon Knack, River Ryan, Roki Sasaki, Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone, Justin Robleski, Ben Kasparius, Jack Dreyer, Nick Frasso, Paul Gervais, Edgardo Henriquez, Kyle Hurt, Will Klein, Bobby Miller, and then Dalton Rushing, Alex Freeland. Andy Pages still has 5 more years of team control. And then Justin Dean, the legend Justin Dean, who played in center field all the time. in the World Series and throughout the course of the playoffs. These are the players that are under the cheap contracts, which means these are the players that really help supplement your roster. And then we get into the Rule 5 draft options. These are going to be players that are going to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft coming up. I believe I have a lot of these correct. They include guys like Nick Destrini, just added back into the organization. Antonio Knowles, got that wicked slider. Ronan Kopp, we'll get to Ronan Kopp in just a minute. Dominant left-handed reliever, big year for him. Garrett McDaniels, another name that you got to know about. And then Jose Rodriguez. These are going to be the three names that are perhaps the most intriguing decisions the Dodgers have to make for the Rule 5 draft because of the success that each one of them have. And we're going to be diving into each one of them in just a little bit. But Jose Rodriguez, insane swinging miss. Garrett McDaniels, look at his ground ball rate combined with the success that he had back in the Dodgers organization. And when you look at these AAA numbers, understand what the league environment of the Pacific Coast League is. We'll get to that later. And then Ronan Kopp. If he can throw strikes, he is as good as just about anybody. He is so good and so talented. Ryan Sublett, another option to be picked up Rule 5 draft. Talented right-handed reliever. Austin Gauthier, Chris Campos, Roque Gutierrez, Peter Hubeck, and Jared Karros. Both of them dealt with injuries this past year. Jacob Metter, Brandon Nee, Kelvin Ramirez, Levan Reynoso, Christian Romero, Lucas Webb, Yainer Fernandez, Griffin Lockwood Power, Nelson Quiroz, Sean McLean, Kyle Nevin, John Rhodes, Taylor Young, David Keith, Chris Newell, Max Bruns, Yoel Ibarra, Reynaldo Yin, Jesus Scalise, Frank Rodriguez, and Jose Meza, I believe are all eligible for the Rule 5 draft, which means if they want to add any of those players, they got to remove somebody either through trade or with moving on, designating them for assignment, releasing them. That is currently part of the 41 players on the roster at this point. Those are going to be interesting decisions for them to be able to make. Now, just a little bit more of a technicality. Let's again go over this because this was a topic that didn't get enough coverage at the beginning of the offseason, but ended up being a crucial ploy to some of the decisions that the Dodgers made, particularly with the Brock Stewart and James Outman trade. So if you remember that trade, the Dodgers traded for Brock Stewart in exchange for James Outman. Why was that so crucial, and why did the organization decide to cash in on James Outman at that point? It wasn't just because he was struggling, which obviously James Outman was struggling. He's an incredibly talented player, but the swing and miss stuff has become overwhelming at this point for him. Really hoping that changes with Minnesota. The difficulty with that is going into this free agent, this offseason, he was going to be without any minor league options, which means that in order for him to be on the major league team, he would have had to stay on the major league roster throughout the rest of his Dodgers career, and they couldn't option him back to the minor league level. Now, where this comes into play is this really impacts the time frame for each one of these guys. And this is one of the reasons why it was so crucial for the Dodgers to keep Andy Pages on the major league roster, or they had to make a decision with either him or James Outman at the beginning of the season, because Andy Pages currently only has one minor league option year remaining. Now, that's not going to impact him as much because he made a statement for himself. And in fact, there's a lot of talk about Andy Pages, and especially because of the struggles that he had during the World Series. And I get that. He was one of the worst postseason players, had one of the worst postseason years in Major League history. Absolutely terrible for Andy Pages in the postseason. However, if you look at the numbers during the course of the regular season, this is not an exaggeration. If you look at Fangraphs and you look at all outfielders, not just center fielders, not just right fielders or left fielders, all outfielders with at least a single plate appearance, you sort them by Fangraphs WAR. You can have a lot of discussion on what Fangraphs WAR is, but according to that metric, Andy Pages was a top 12 outfielder in the game of baseball last year. And to have him on a pre-arbitration eligible deal, to have him for 5+ years, you're going to want to keep him around in the organization. That is going to be the start of different arguments. But if you talk about top 12 outfielders, especially when the Dodgers are needing help in the outfield, he has been one of the most valuable contracts in the game of baseball. He only has one option year left. didn't mean to turn into a rant about Andy Pages, but this is important for the development because the minor league option years impacts your depth that you have, and especially if you're looking for guys to potentially move off of, these are going to be some of the decisions that you're going to have to make. So let's look at 0 option years. Players that, if they are around the organization, have to be at the major league level. This includes Anthony Banda, Tony Gonsolin, Brusdar Guerrero, Evan Phillips, Brock Stewart, and Ben Rortvedt. If you want any of them to be on your roster, now some of these players are going to be injured, so some of them going to be on the 60-day injured list, but if you want them when they are healthy to be in your organization, they have to be on the major league roster. What about 1 option year? This means that each one of these players basically has 1 more year of development before they have to stick on the major league roster for the entirety of their Dodgers career going forward. This includes Nick Frasso, Michael Grove, Will Klein, Landon Knack, Justin Robleski, Andy Pages, and Esteury Ruiz. What's noticeable, some of the guys that stand out in this one are a Justin Robleski, meaning that if you want Robo to be on your organization for a while, 2026 is going to be the last year he can be that guy that goes up and down before he has to stick with the Los Angeles Dodgers. This also is important for guys like Will Klein or Landon Knack, really solid depth option for a pitcher, Michael Grove, and Nick Frasso. The organization is running out of time with the development of Nick Frasso because of the injuries that he has sustained. He only has 1 more option year left. Then we go to players with 2 option years. This includes Ben Casparius, Paul Gervais, Edgardo Henriquez, Kyle Hurt, Bobby Miller. Technically, if you look at Fangraphs, still has 2 option years. If doing my own math, I think it's a little bit more closer to 1, but I'm not technically sure. Usually Fangraphs is better at this than I am, so let's just assume that he has 2 option years. Emmett Sheehan, Gavin Stone. If these players have 2 option years, there's a lot more time to be able to develop. One decision, and I don't have a lot of criticism for the organization, but if this is true, and if you take into account Fangraphs and what they were able to do for their roster, counting the number of option years, if it is true that Alex Freeland only has 2 option years, remember, at the beginning of September, Alex Freeland was on the roster. He was added sometime throughout the course of the summer and stayed with the Los Angeles Dodgers for a little bit, but then was optioned down. I believe it was after a game in Pittsburgh. It was beginning of September, and the rule for minor league options is if a player spends at least 20 days within the AAA level, then an option year is exercised. If it is true that the Dodgers lost an option year over a matter of days of Alex Freeland, I think that is a horrendous mistake by the organization, even if it gave you a marginal chance to be able to win. I said that at the time in which Alex Freeland was optioned. If Fangraphs is right and Alex Freeland has only 2 option years, this is because of a matter of days, because I think less than a week later, Justin Dean was optioned back down to Oklahoma City, and he still has 3 option years. If that is true, I seriously disagree with the organization and taking an entire year of development from Alex Freeland away from him. I hope Fangraphs is wrong with that, but that appears to be the case based off the numbers that they put up. Hae-Sung Kim, 2 option years, and then Alex Call also has 2 options that can be exercised. Players with 3 option years, Jack Dreyer, River Ryan, Roki Sasaki, Justin Dean, and Dalton Rushing, especially if you like your pitchers and want guys that can be reinforcements and depth in your organization. You want a lot of players with 2 or 3 option years because that buys you a lot of time with each one of these players. Obviously, you're looking for players with a lot of success, and that's not saying that some of these players won't be taken into account, but that also means that if you're planning on using any of these guys, especially the 1-year guys, as depth options, your time frame for development is 2026 before you have to make a very serious decision about as far as each one of these guys. So let's take a little bit of a step back as far as what we've established. And I know that you guys have been amazing in the comment section. First off, I can't thank you guys enough for being and interacting with the show. It means the absolute world to me. But let's take a little bit of a step back what this roster means. Dodgers currently have 41 players on their roster, and they're going to have to make a decision as to each and every single one of these guys and make a proper evaluation as far as which one of these guys do we want to develop. Because now that if the goal actually is to be a three-peat, to go out and win 3 championships in a row, you have to make a decision as far as what's going to be in the best interest for the organization to win 3 championships in a row. But not just to win 3 championships in a row, because while the magic of 2025 is incredible, the goal is not to win just back-to-back World Series championships. It is to win as many championships as you possibly can, and the organization has to make a determination as far as what's going to be in the best interest of the organization. So, let's do a little bit of a further deep dive, because those are the names, those are the players, and that is the state of where the system is at. And one, this is all designed to be able to educate, encourage dialogue and debate for each one of you guys. I want you guys to be able to be as well informed as you possibly can be with each one of these decisions. And that includes presenting the best for myself. Now, when we're going into each one of these numbers that we're going to be going through, which we're going to be starting with the offense at first. We're going to be looking at the offensive players that are part of this organization, including guys that are not technically as part of the organization anymore, that are going to be free agents, which includes guys like Miguel Rojas and Iquique Hernandez. What we're going to be looking at is something that has been somewhat presented to each one of you guys through various means. It's something that's very similar to some of the results that I had output for the World Series matchup. If you were around for the preview of the Dodgers Blue Jays World Series, I actually gave you guys full access to an Excel sheet that broke down both the Dodgers and the Blue Jays roster. We're going to be taking a look at that, except we're going to be taking a little bit of a different twist, because there's going to be a lot of people presenting numbers for each one of these players. However, what is the best evaluation that we can make for each one of these players? One of the things that you have to do when evaluating a player, especially statistically, is you have to take into account past information to predict future results. The most important thing that we want to do is predict what is going to happen for the future of each one of these players. Now, the difficulty of that, and this is where I think some of the coverage gets a little bit skewed, is it is often skewed by the most recent season that a player has. Meaning that when we're talking about the evaluation of players, especially when we're going to be talking about outfield targets that the Dodgers should go out and target, it's often going to be skewed by their 2025 results. When you look at and really study numbers and how things happen throughout the course of the season, and this is especially apparent with guys like relievers. Relievers we talk about as extremely volatile, meaning they're up one year as far as really good one year, and they're back down the next year. This can often be true with individual players as well, which means that the best way to analyze players, at least in my opinion, is not just with their 2025 stats. I think their 2025 stats are incredibly crucial, but I don't think that presents the full picture, because there are certain players that have bad years. Teoscar Hernandez had a bad year this year during the course of the regular season, just above league average as a bat. That's not the player that he was in 2024. That's not really the player that he has been throughout his entirety of the career. Same thing, there can be players that have a career year, and that should be taken into account, but the more bigger picture should be taken into account as well. So, what we're going to be doing, and this is incredibly crucial for you guys to understand as far as the numbers that I'm going to present, is we're going to be looking not just at the 2025 stats, and not just at the overall career stats, because I don't think the overall career stats are as relevant as the previous 3 season stats. So what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at each one of these players and their numbers from 2023 to 2025. What do those numbers present? Because I think that removes some of the variability of year to year in 2025 and presents a better picture of how good this player is. Not to say that this player will be this player in 2026, but this removes a little bit of variance of year to year that year to year variability presents. So what we're going to be doing, we're first going to be looking at the offense. So, what I have is each one of these players listed, so you can see Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy, Will Smith, Teo, Tommy Edman, Andy Pages, so on and so forth, their numbers. Now, this is just Major League statistics, which really impacts Alex Freeland, Dalton Rushing, Hae-Sung Kim as well. Those players don't have extensive Major League careers, which means that their numbers are going to be skewed by what they did in 2025 and might not be fully representative of what they're going to do in the future. That's an asterisk to keep in mind. However, this presents a little bit of an overall, how have they done in the past couple of seasons, which is especially apparent when talking about players that have had a poor 2025. Mookie Betts had a poor 2025 offensively. However, I think if you look at his overall career norms, very much outside of his career norms. So these are going to be the numbers for each one of these players. It's their age, position, batting, and this is going to be breaking down by several different things. We're going to look at results, expected statistics, splits, how they did versus righty versus lefties, their power numbers, we'll go through each one of those, disciplined, how disciplined each one of these players are, defense, we'll go over because this one right here is a little bit innovative and should be adapted by the baseball world, as well as sprint speed. There is other stuff that you can explore in here once you actually get access to this data, including these numbers plus, as far as comparing them to each other, but we won't go into that today. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the overall offensive stuff for each one of these players. So Shohei Ohtani, over the past 3 seasons, again, remember, 2023 to 2025 stats, 177 WRC+. Mookie Betts, really good WRC+, 136. Freddie Freeman, 146 as well. You can see with this, especially at the top of the order, the guys that they're actually relying upon, a lot of success for each one of these guys. Where you can see a little bit of an issue is some of the depth, which very much apparent, which, by the way, red equals good, blue equals bad. Some of the numbers are a little bit more difficult to read. This is running off of the baseball savant type of numbers that we are having. Red equals good, blue equals bad. You can see the top of the order, you have several guys that are, you have 5 different guys that are 120 WRC plus, 120 WRC plus or greater players, including some guys that are just exceptional as well. And then some of the depth, Teoscar Hernandez had put up solid results. Andy Pages, you combine his numbers over the past 2 seasons in his career, 107 WRC plus for him. Alex Call, we'll get into him a little bit. Interesting player, 100 WRC plus for him. But you look at some of the players like Miguel Rojas, 90, Kike Hernandez, 75. These are some of the expected stats. Again, some of the mainstay players, Shohei Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Muncy, have really solid expected numbers. You look at some of the splits. This is where we're going to break it down and we're going to spend a little bit more time on. These are what are some of the numbers in the splits. I'm just showing these on the screen. You can pause these and take a look and study some of these numbers a little bit at your own. Power numbers. This includes ISO, barrel percentage, hard hit percentage, pull air percentage, how well you're able to pull for air, and ground ball percentage. One thing I want to point out to you guys, and this actually was really intriguing to me. One player that actually did really well in this stats, even though he massively struggled in the season, this is really emphasized by his strikeout percentage, Dalton Rushing. Look at his power numbers, 14% barrel percentage, 45% hard hit percentage, 29% pull air percentage, meaning that he's able to get the ball pulled, which really does have a strong correlation with power numbers, and then a really low ground ball rate. If he can get some constant contact, he can be a bat that hits for some really solid power this season. That is something that kind of stood out for me, and something where an organization, whether you're the Dodgers or another organization, is going to keep that in mind going forward. Looking at the discipline numbers, walk percentage, strikeout percentage, chase and whip percentages, one player that stands out in this category is Alex Call, 11.5 walk percentage, 17.5 strikeout percentage, does not chase at all, and does not get a whole lot of whiffs. He's somebody that really excels in this category. Rushing and Freeland don't chase. However, there's still a lot of swing and miss in their game. That's going to be something that they're going to have to adapt to going forward. This is also something to keep in mind, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be utilizing to analyze defense going forward. So, what defense average over 162 games is. First off, let's talk about the main categories of defense that we're going to keep in mind going forward. We're going to take into account defensive run saves, outs above average, and fielding run value. For those of you who are not familiar with each one of these metrics, these are the 3 most common SABR metric, just meaning a little bit more statistically inclined metrics that teams use to be able to analyze how good a player is defensively, at least in the public baseball world. These are the ones that teams or that statisticians are going to point to as far as how good this player is at defense. They each have varying things that they're specifically measuring, but they are imperfect. None of them is a perfect statistic, and what they also are is cumulative. This is especially when you're taking into account cumulative stats. With a stat like WAR, which I quoted a little bit earlier, one of the things that you have to keep in mind with that, it is gained or lost the more that you actually play. Meaning, for example, a player like Miguel Rojas, let's say that he only plays 60 games throughout the course of the season, and you look at him and let's say he has a 4 outs above average. Well, that might put him at the 75th to 80th percentile. However, those 4 outs above an average only come within 55 to 60 games. Meaning that if he were to play a full season, that has a lot more weight as a part of it. And because none of these measures are completely perfect, what I have decided to do is create my own measure. That's what I do as a statistician. And so what I have done is I've taken defensive runs saved, out above average, and fielding run value, created an average of each one of those, said that each one of those are equal in weight, and then put that on a scale of 162 games, depending on how many games a player has played in the season. Now, that's not a perfect statistic as far as games. For example, you see Andy Pages 166 games. This is because he moves around positions very much. So it's just adding the number of games at each position a player has played. It's not completely perfect, but it provides a little bit of a better measurement as far as how good a player actually is throughout the course of the season. So, for example, Mookie Betts, if you look at the past numbers, and I think this number is just based off his shortstop statistics because I am anticipating him being a shortstop. I don't remember exactly if that's it, but he would have a value of 4, meaning that he is a little bit above league average as a defensive player. Whereas somebody like a Teoscar Hernandez, who outs above average, field and run value, really don't like the numbers that he put up. A little bit more league average with defensive run save, which defensive run saves leans a little bit positive. You're going to have a negative value for him. Same thing with like player like an Esteury Ruiz. Not a good player overall. But this also impacts a player like Miguel Rojas. So you can see based off of this metric and combining the defensive run saves, outs above average, and feeding run value would be the best defensive player the team has going forward. Tommy Edman, really solid defensively. Andy Pages has taken massive strides defensively in the outfield. Alex Call, also really solid defensively as well. These are the values for defense that a player has. Where I want to get a little bit more particular, and this is going to showcase some of the needs that this Dodger offense has, what I've decided to do is create a roster that could be had for this Dodgers team. Now, this is under a couple of different assumptions. One, that the Dodgers go ahead and decide to have Dalton Rushing as part of their roster. You can throw Ben Rortvedt as part of their roster. Not really the massive deal in the world. Either one of them aren't immediately going to play a massive role based on the impact that Will Smith has at this point. We'll move out of that conversation right now. This is assuming that the Dodgers re-sign Kike Hernandez and Miguel Rojas, which if we're talking about probability that each one of those guys is signed, I would put probably each of them at probably a 60 to 65% chance that they are coming back. So this is assuming that Kike Hernandez and Miguel Rojas are part of the roster and that Max Muncy is part of the roster. If that is the case, the only player that you have room for, assuming all the players are healthy, is one additional outfielder. Really the role that a Michael Conforto was able to make. And I believe that should be a left-handed outfield bat for reasons that I'm going to explain in just a minute. So, these WRC plus numbers, not their 2025 stats, they're stats from 2023 through 2025 to give you a better picture as far as how good these players are versus right-handed pitching and left-handed pitching. And this is so incredibly important because and this is where I'm going to cut over to me before we go into this in just a second. If the Dodgers were to have fallen in the World Series, one of the reasons why they would have fallen in the World Series, which they didn't, they're back-to-back World Series champion, If you look at the bottom of their order, and this is something I pointed out in the show, after Freddie Freeman, the only hitter that is really solid against right-handed pitching was Max Muncy in that lineup. You had Teoscar Hernandez and Max Muncy and Andy Pages and Tommy Edman and Kike Hernandez. The only option that's good against right-handed options would have been Max Muncy. Again, if we look at the past several seasons with each one of these guys, let's go through each one of these guys and what they're able to do. Teoscar Hernandez, 110 WRC plus against righties, although the numbers that he had last year, a lot worse than what he had in 2024 and 2023. Andy Pages, league average against righties. Tommy Edman, significantly worse against righties than he is against lefties. Against lefties, he's a lot better. And then a player like a Kike Hernandez, regular season stats, not good for Kike Hernandez. That's going to be a topic of conversation going forward that we're going to have. So the bottom of the lineup really struggled against righties. And there wasn't, because Michael Conforto did not work out as a free agent signing, wasn't that stopper at the bottom of the lineup to be able to hit against righties. And we're going to show you what the impact of what that's going to be. So what I have created is, by WRC Plus over the past 3 seasons, 2023 to 2025, created my own lineup, assuming that the Dodgers, and this is with the Dodgers just re-signing Kike, re-signing Miguel Rojas, picking up the club option for Max Muncy, and re-signing somebody that is even just pretty solid in left field, that's a left-handed bat that can hit against right-handed pitching. Let's assume that that is what they go after. This is what the lineups could look like as part of your roster versus righties, and this is not a precise lineup of what it could look like, but we'll talk about the game plan in just a minute, because there's actually a really fun exercise that we're going to go down below in just a minute. Shohei Ohtani, obviously really solid against righties. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Max Muncy. The top 4 of your lineup versus right-handed pitching could be 134 or better WRC plus. Will Smith, you have the top 5 being really solid. Then you can have Teoscar Hernandez, followed by a left field or right field or center field option. The one thing that they would likely have to be to fit in with this characteristic is hit well against right-handed pitching. Then you have Andy Pages and Tommy Edman lining out the lineup. If you combine and average the WRC plus that each one of these players have, that combines to an average of about a 129 WRC plus. Incredible stuff that you can have. Let's talk about versus left-handed pitching, because this is where the Dodgers bench is actually at its finest as currently constructed, assuming they bring back Miguel Rojas. If they bring back Miguel Rojas and if Alex Call is part of your roster, you can construct a lineup without a free agent that each has an average of at least a 110 WRC plus over the past 3 seasons against left-handed pitching. That it would be potentially a lineup of Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Will Smith, Freddie Freeman, Teoscar Hernandez, Miguel Rojas, who won 13 WRC plus versus lefties the past 3 seasons. Alex Call won 14 WRC plus against lefties the past 3 seasons. They're going to have to make a decision as far as what type of player Alex Call actually means to this organization. Andy Pages, really solid against lefties, and Tommy Edman, who's significantly better against lefties as well. This could be how you game plan this lineup. And what the Dodgers are going to have to decide is, do they go for more star power as part of the outfield, meaning the guy that can hit against righties and lefties really well, a la guy like a Kyle Tucker or a guy like a Cody Bellinger? Or do they decide to go with a little bit more of the trend of where the game of baseball is going and go with an approach that utilizes the bench a little bit more? So what I'm going to do is we're actually going to go through a little bit of a game scenario type of exercise that an opposing team would try to do in order to counteract each one of these lineups, and what the Dodgers could potentially do. So this is my own version of game planning. Game planning meaning working out and structuring how a game could actually map out. So we have versus a right-handed starter and a left-handed starter. I put a little bit of a caveat because I want to make it a little bit more difficult for myself. I said right-handed starter versus a left-handed pitching opener. Opener, left-handed option that can face through at least 3 hitters left-handed before the right-handed starter comes in. This is if a team analytically wants to go against some of the matchups, this is how the game plan could potentially work out. This is with the lineup of how it looks right here. Now, the bat that I'm using right here, left-handed bat, has a 120 WRC plus. That actually is a specific player. I'm not going to reveal who that specific player is, but let's assume that you have a platoon left-handed bat that is an option that you could utilize that is really solid. If you were an opposing team with a left-handed opener, with this lineup, you would want to get through Shohei Ohtani all the way through a player like a Max Muncy with the opener. Then you would have, that's 4 batters the opener would face. Then you could have your starter go out there, and this becomes a really difficult option for you as a starting pitcher, because how I have it mapped out is bringing in a lefty reliever after the starter only faces 17 different batters. You look at, there's a lot of run of pretty advantageous matchups for the right-handed starter. This is if the team wants to game plan particularly around Max Muncy in the 4-hole. You have a lefty opener starting the game against Max Muncy, and then a lefty reliever coming in for Max Muncy. Because again, a lot of the game and where it's turning to is a matchup-focused game, and you want to give and present yourself with the optimal type of matchups going forward. And the reason why I have the lineup currently constructed as far as this is assuming that you have an extreme difference in matchups as far as splits between Max Muncy and the outfielder that you have, meaning that both of these guys, Max Muncy and whoever the outfielder is, has significantly better against right-handed pitching versus left-handed pitching. You don't want a left-handed reliever to come in and necessarily face both of them. So in this scenario, you could have a left-handed reliever come in for Max Muncy. That gives you, if that's the case, an advantageous matchup, Will Smith and Teoscar Hernandez. Then you can substitute to face that left-handed reliever, Alex Call. The other team can substitute a right-handed reliever as a counteraction. Again, I'm thinking about the best-case scenario for the opponent. Then a lefty reliever for these options. You can substitute Miguel Rojas potentially to be able to face a left-handed reliever. They could also counter with that. But in this scenario, the opposing team, in order to get an advantageous matchup 4 times through the Dodgers order, which is what you have to game plan for, they're utilizing, I think, like 7 different relievers. Throughout the regular season, that's not going to be something that teams are going to be able to utilize, and you're having a lot of different matchups. And even still, with the best case scenario an opposing team could have with the Dodgers' best lineup, the Dodgers lineup still averages a 119 WRC plus with this roster. Versus lefties, this is with a traditional left-handed starter. You get to go through the order 2 times all the way through Freddie Freeman. Then as soon as if they want to bring in a right-handed reliever, look at this bottom run of the lineup: Teoscar, Miguel Rojas, Alex Call, Andy Pages, Tommy Edman. Very likely, if they have a left-handed starter, they're going to want a right-handed reliever to come in for this run of the lineup. If they decide to pitch through Freddie Freeman, what you can do with the right-handed reliever is have them face Teoscar Hernandez. Then you can pinch hit both a Max Muncy for Miguel Rojas and the outfielder that you have as part of your roster that only hits right-handed bats, and have really advantageous matchups right there. So through the first 3 times through the order, this can really set up really well for your offense. Go on from there. Again, really solid numbers that they would have from there. What this is just an exercise as far as a game plan goes going forward as to what's going on behind the scenes, constructing the lineup. Really fun exercise. I would encourage you guys, once the Excel spreadsheet is shared tomorrow, to be able to look through that and be able to talk about the game planning stuff. Curious some of your thoughts as far as what that game plan would look like. As far as the roster, if this was concerned, this would be the depth positional wise. This includes major league options up at top, followed by minor league options down below that they could potentially have. Obviously, this is assuming that Dalton Rushing is at the big league level and they somehow are able to retain against Ben Rortvedt. What this also is going to have you do when you're looking at defensive splits, when you're looking at splits, is you're also going to have to keep in mind different defense. No matter which roster I have, how are they going to do defensively, and making sure that you construct a good defense surrounding them as well. This is where I'm using my own metric that I'm using to evaluate how good a defense actually is. And we're going to be utilizing this when we're talking about adding players and how do they actually fit as part of this mix. Here's all the different players that would potentially be part of the roster, not including the free agent left-handed bat option. And then one thing to keep in mind, and this is especially apparent, especially with some of the guys they at the minor league level, Alex Freeland, Dalton Rushing, if they are part of the mix, and especially because they are a lot better against righties than they are against lefties, one thing to keep in mind, and when you're targeting some sort of left-handed bat, one thing that might be crucial is if you have to utilize Freeland and Rushing, or you get to utilize Freeland and Rushing, if they have high strikeout percentages, and you have Teoscar Hernandez and Shohei Ohtani and Max Muncy that's part of the mix, and Andy Pages, all of them have high strikeout percentages. One thing that you might want to keep in mind is you could start constructing a pretty high strikeout lineup against right-handed pitching if you utilize each one of those guys. That's not to say you have to target a left-handed outfielder with low strikeout percentage, but that might be one of the considerations and one of the arguments for either going out and getting or acquiring a outfielder that fits a particular type of criteria. That's the lineup splits of where they are at. Let's also look at the Dodgers lineup as far as age. This is just for you guys to be able to understand the age of each one of these players. You're going to notice that there's a lot of these players that are on the roster that are going to get up there in age pretty quickly, which means you can't necessarily add a ton of guys for long-term contracts that are going to age quickly, because one of the things we talk about quite a bit here on Dodgers Dogs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network, is the aging curve is incredibly real in the game of baseball, meaning that as players get older, their production significantly decreases. And this is especially true once you get past the age 32 to 33 season. Your production starts, for most players, starts to take a decline. Now, I'm not anticipating that to happen necessarily for Shohei Ohtani, but for a player like Mookie Betts, one of the things that we're going to have to keep in mind in 2026 is the struggles that he had this previous season just as a result of a fluke of circumstances, meaning he was taken into account shortstop for the first full year. You know, he started off 2024 at the shortstop position, but for the first full year, and he had to deal with the sickness going into the series that they had in Japan. That I don't necessarily know if it's due to the aging curve, a mix of circumstances, part of that. But one of the questions that the Dodgers are going to have to answer is how many of these long-term contracts are they going to want to acquire, to the point where, I mean, if you look at 2029, some of the players that are in the roster, Shohei Ohtani is going to be 34, Mookie Betts is going to be 36, Will Smith 34, Tommy Edman 34, Andy Pages 28, pretty solid for him, Alex Call 34. You're going to have some of these players, especially if you add other players as part of the mix, that are going to be starting to age a little quick. And one of the things in which this Dodgers dynasty could start to crumble is if they age out of their dynasty. They already have the oldest roster as far as their roster, but they could also be a tricky situation to where they could age out of their roster as well. Just one thing to notice going forward with their roster, in all things considered. Again, this is designed to be able to provide as much information for you guys to understand the roster as best as you possibly can. So, this is the Dodgers offense as far as the players, where they are at. These are some of the numbers. Again, this will be available for you guys following the show tomorrow at 6 o'clock Pacific. But this is the offensive side. Let's take a look quickly at the pitching side. We won't go too much longer. I actually want to dive into some of the comments perhaps in just a little bit. Pitching side. I know it's a little bit smaller in this case because there's a lot more options on the pitching side. Here is the numbers that the pitchers have. Again, 2023 through 2025 numbers, because I think that is the best way to be able to evaluate each one of these players. We have the overall ERA estimators. We have ERA, expected ERA, FIP, expected FIP, and Sierra. These are the numbers that are right around the same, put on the scale of ERA, best intended to be able to give a best estimate for how good the pitcher actually did. ERA, everybody's familiar with. Some of these other ones are a little bit more advanced. What I have done is created some sort of average with each one of these. Now, it's not necessarily a direct average because If you look a little bit further on the spreadsheet, it's actually weighted a little bit more towards some of the advanced statistics, just slightly, but it is a right around an average of each one of these to help us better understand just how good this pitcher is. This would be the one that I would take a look at as far as how good each one of these pitchers are, because I don't think ERA by itself is the best predictor. I don't think FIP by itself is the best predictor. I don't think SIERA by itself is the best predictor of how good a player or a person actually is. I think somewhere in between each one of these and take into account each one of these is a good thing. So if you look at the ERA average between all of those, Tyler Glasnow, really solid, 3.15. Shohei Ohtani, really solid. Blake Snell, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, those 4 starters are absolutely incredible what they have. Emmett Sheehan, also really solid xFIP in his big league career so far, 3.02. Where this gets into a little bit of a difficult discussion, and let's talk about one player in particular right now. If you look at the past 3 seasons, now it's very limited as far as the availability that Tony Gonsolin has been able to have. But the numbers have not been good for Tony Gonsolin recently. A 4.99 ERA over the past 3 seasons, 5.76 expected ERA, combined average of about 5.2, a little over 5. With Tony Gonsolin, he has 1 year remaining on his contract, and there is a very serious question mark as far as when or if he's going to be able to come back and be part of the Dodgers roster. Which means that if the organization is holding on to him, at least until spring training, they're holding on to starting pitching depth. But the question is he actually a better option than some of the other guys they have? You look at somebody like a Landon Knack, he has put up better numbers at the big league level than Tony Gonsolin over the past several seasons by all ERA estimators. They also have guys like River Ryan coming back. Roki Sasaki could potentially be part of this mix, and this does not include the postseason stuff where you look at electric. Gavin Stone is coming back from injury. Justin Robleski, also another starting option. Tony Gonsolin and his situation, if they have to make a decision because he has only 1 more year left of club control, even though the organization desperately wants to do the best for each one of these players, I think if you just take into account the numbers he has with the past couple of seasons, combined by the fact that he is going to be out for a good chunk of 2026, he unfortunately could be one of the guys that is impacted by the roster moves, because this could be one of the only ways they could create a spot for some of the other players on the roster. These are some of the numbers that each one of these players has put up. You look at some of the bullpen. Tanner Scott, while he had a terrible 2025 season by his metric, still, if you combine, even included his 2025 season with the previous 2 seasons beforehand, 2.78 ERA, which means that I'm anticipating some sort of positive regression for him. It's him to get better results, or at least closer to some of these results than what we saw in 2025. Blake Trinan, again, not good in 2025. Hoping to get better results for him. He's starting to get older though, age 38. Take into account their age with these numbers is going to be important. Numbers for Alex Vesia, Brusdar Graterol when he's healthy, past 3 seasons, really solid ERA, 1.33, Evan Phillips, Brock Stewart, and then some of the other players as well. So we have ERA estimators for each one of these players. We have swing and miss numbers. This includes chase percentage, whiff percentage, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, strikeout minus walk percentage, which is a really good statistic. Swinging strike percentage, the number of swings and misses that you generate on a per pitch basis. Called strike plus swinging strike percentage. This adds into account the number of called strikes that you get, combined with the swinging strike percentage that you have. Fastball velo, and then overall stuff plus. This is going to take into account swing and miss numbers that they have, as well as different splits. The WOBA, weighted on base average, versus right-handed hitters and left-handed hitters. WOBA puts it on scale of on base percentage, but weighs different outcomes differently. Home runs better than singles for a hitter. For a pitcher, significantly worse. So it takes that into account with numbers. And then contact quality. For contact quality, I have ground ball percentage, WOBA, expected WOBA based on quality of contact, and then hard hit percentage. So these are going to be different ways to be able to measure each one of these pitchers. Again, similar to what we did for the hitters, let's break it down with some of the bullpen numbers. We're going to specifically look at weighted on base average. League average is about 320. Lower scores are significantly better and will be highlighted more in red, whereas numbers highlighted more in blue. If we look at the bullpen options, which this is specifically bullpen, we want to make sure that the Dodgers can get right-handed hitters out and left-handed hitters out. Another weakness for the Dodgers bullpen throughout the course of the postseason is they didn't have a whole lot of options to get right-handed hitters out. They could really utilize, especially a bullpen arm that can get right-handed hitters out without guys like Brusdar Graterol, Evan Phillips, or Brock Stewart, counting on those guys to be part of the roster. Again, Evan Phillips, Brock Stewart, likely to miss a good chunk of 2026. Brusdar Graterol, been injured for quite a bit, so it remains a question mark. But as far as the options that they have, Anthony Banda did not have a good World Series, but he is extremely good against left-handed hitters. The versus left-handed hitters. It says versus left-handed pitching, but it's versus left-handed hitters. Didn't catch that mistake. He has put up a 246 over the past 3 seasons WOBA against lefties. Tanner Scott has been solid against righties and lefties when he's been good. Blake Treinen, only good against righties. Against lefties, he has not been good at all over the past couple seasons. And then Alex Vesia can get both of them out. Here is your depth options of what you have as far as options that can go and get guys out. Jack Dreyer, good against lefties. He could be another guy that you can add part of the mix to get lefties out. Ben Kasparius, been solid against both of them. Paul Gervais, very limited minor league career, wouldn't take too much into those numbers. Michael Grove, more solid against righties, not good against lefties. Edgardo Enriquez, much better against righties than lefties. Same with Kyle Hurt, again, very limited numbers. Will Klein wouldn't pay attention to any of those numbers. Not much major league career with that. Roki Sasaki seemed like a different pitcher when he was at the World Series, so wouldn't pay too much attention to those numbers. And then Robleski, much better against lefties than he is against righties. And what you can see is with the guys that are better against righties, you're relying on guys like Edgardo Enriquez and Kyle Hurt. A Jack Dreyer could be a potential option, but this opens up some avenues, especially for the Dodgers, to add players to the roster. And if we look back to the roster construction, there's 9 different guys out of the 14 pitchers that you could have on your roster with Shohei Ohtani in the mix. They really could utilize somebody who's a right-handed relief option to add to this mix, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be really important for them to consider going forward. And I think it's ultimately going to be the source of players that they end up targeting. One thing that we're not going to necessarily get into on this show, but one thing that we're going to be getting into perhaps on future shows, and this is just going to be a little bit of a sneak preview because actually we'll cut over here in just a second before I reveal it. One of the things we pride ourselves on here at Dodgers Dogs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network, which this is your first time tuning in. We thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this. One of the things we pride ourselves most on, and we'll be providing a lot more coverage going forward, is access to Down on the Farm. I am here in the state of Michigan. I get great access to the players in Great Lakes, the high A affiliate of the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Great Lakes Loons. Very much appreciative of everything that the organization does there. Casey, who is Mr. Dodgers Daily himself, gets access to Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Mark Watkins, one of the other contributors, gets access now to the Ontario Buzzer Towers, I think is what the title of their name is, the new affiliate, low A affiliate of the Los Angeles Dodgers. We have a lot of access to the organization through the minor league system, and we want to provide you with the best coverage we possibly can. And one of the ways that I've been able to do that, actually, is I have a little bit of a cheat sheet. It's not based off of 2023 through 2025 numbers like the Major League Baseball season is. But what we're going to be able to do eventually, and this is something really cool that I was able to work on, is take key numbers through the minor league season and put them on a scale of a plus statistic. Now, for a statistic like WRC plus, again, the show is very, very technical. So if you have to take these in smaller spurts, I highly encourage you to take it into smaller spurts because there's information overload on this show, to say the least. But essentially what a plus statistic is it puts numbers on a scale of 100 being the league average and anything above 100 being above league average and anything below 100 being below league average. Why is this important? Well, if you look at, for example, the Oklahoma City Comets and their pitchers in particular, you might look at somebody like a let's take somebody who's Rule 5 eligible, like a Garrett McDaniels, and you might look at his ERA and say 3.92 ERA on the season. Okay, that's about league average for a pitcher. That's decent, but nothing overwhelming. However, if you understand the Pacific Coast League and what it was this season, the league average ERA at the Pacific Coast League was 5.45. It was a 5.5 ERA. That was the league average ERA, which means that if you look at Garrett McDaniels and his 3.92 ERA and the environment of which he had, he was significantly better than what the league average was. So what I have created, and this is going to be something that we're not going to look in depth at today, but something we can utilize going forward. We have each one of the minor league players in the system for their 2025 numbers as far as how they compare to the league average numbers of the league. These are the league average numbers of each one of the leagues that the Dodgers are at. And here are different numbers that each one of the players have. ERA, FIP, xFIP, strikeout walk percentage, strikeout minus walk percentage, swinging strike percentages, so on and so forth. We have it for the pitchers in the organization. We also have it for the offensive players in the organization as well, if we can score over here. And what this is going to really allow us to do, one is to evaluate the players individually, just how good of a 2025 season they had. For example, Dalton Rushing, the reason why he was brought up, 144 WRC+, but you look at some of the numbers like his OPS, really solid, power, significant good power for him. Jose Ramos had really good power, same with Ryan Ward. Really good walk numbers for Dalton Rushing and so. What this also allows us to be able to do is you actually scroll down to the bottom. It also allows you to be able to highlight the strengths of your organization. And this is going to be something that, especially with the decision that they're going to have to make with adding an outfielder. If they want to add outfielders with multiple years of control, one thing that they have to understand is the strength of the Dodgers organization right now is within their minor league system is the outfield depth. Let's go through some of those names really quick. And we're not going to include Ryan Ward. We're not going to include Jose Ramos because I believe both of those guys are going to be free agents at the end of the minor league year. But this includes guys like Chris Newell, 119 WRC plus on the season. Really good power numbers at the AA level, 44% better above league average in his ISO. This includes him. This includes also an outfielder like Damon Keith, who numbers don't necessarily step out, but has an extreme amount of tools. Cole Myers, one of the most underrated guys within the system, 127 WRC plus at the AA level with insane amount of speed, really good walk numbers, about close to 13% walk percentage. It includes two guys that they added in the system, James Tibbs III and Zach Earhart, part of this outfield mix. All of those guys spent significant time at the AA level, could be getting a lot of playing time at AAA next year and could be knocking on the door potentially. If you don't believe in those guys though, look at some of the numbers with guys like a Zaire Hope or a Kendall George who put up a 131 WRC plus and stole 100 bases this year. Josue DePaula, Zaire Hope and Josue DePaula get a lot of publication, but it's not just them. Mike Sirota, 184 WRC plus on the season at Great Lakes for him. 136 for Eduardo Quintero, one of the best outfielders in minor league baseball for him. Cole Myers, 143 when he was in Great Lakes as well. There's a lot of really talented outfielders, and there's even some of these that are going to be coming up next year that you're going to start to hear about, and some of the guys that they drafted that you're going to start to hear about. Some of the decisions that they're going to have to make, and the reason why we're looking at all their entire roster right now is because they have to take a self-evaluation as far as where their entire roster and where the strengths of the organization are as a whole before they make a decision as far as, do we want to sign Kyle Tucker? Because if the Dodgers decide to sign Kyle Tucker, guess who that impacts? That impacts Zach Earhart, that impacts James Tibbs III, that impacts Josue DePaula, Zaire Hope, so on and so forth. Now you might say, yeah, let's make that risk over Kyle Tucker. I might even agree with you that you should make that risk for that because these are just players and it's rings over, or parades over prospects, whatever the phrase actually is. But in order to have future parades, if you enjoyed what you saw today and want future parades to happen in the future, You can't just have guys that sign major league deals because you're eventually going to age out of those contracts. You need a supplement of both. So the decision that the Dodgers are going to have to make is, if the strength of the minor league system is in their outfielders, how aggressive year-wise do they be with some of their contracts? And it could be with Teoscar Hernandez having 2 years left. You're anticipating 2 years for some of these guys to wait to call up, in which case you're not ultimately concerned about it. I actually kind of agree with that take. I think some of these guys are going to take a year or two to be able to come up, but that is a decision that the organization is going to have to evaluate itself at, and they want to make the best decisions going forward because the organization right now is an absolute juggernaut. They have been absolutely on a roll with each and every aspect of the organization. And we're going to be diving into this a little bit further with the offseason. When we're talking about offseason coverage, we're not just going to have an Excel spreadsheet on where the players are at, the 2023 through 2025 stats. What we're going to be talking about going forward, one, for tomorrow, we're actually going to be talking about different potential targets, particularly when it comes to the outfield and relief pitching market. And you best believe we're having 2023 through 2025 stats on each one of those players. And that's why I'm not releasing this Excel spreadsheet yet, because I don't want to reveal that list quite yet. But going forward, we're also going to have an evaluation, and this is in the process of happening right now. And in part, some of the research, what I've done with it before, but the organization is an absolute juggernaut, and I don't think we appreciate just how well the Andrew Friedman era of Dodgers baseball has been. So we're going to be taking a real look at the Dodgers organization in a lot of different aspects. This includes the Major League Baseball draft. This includes with the player development, particularly with the hitting wise. How well do the Dodgers do in comparison to other organizations? This also is going to include, and if you remember back to shortly after the trade deadline, we compared the Dodgers versus the Padres. How have they done in free agency versus trades? We're not just looking at Dodgers versus Padres. We're looking at Dodgers versus everybody in free agency and making comparison of the Andrew Friedman era. There is so much research that's going to be coming out going forward about the Dodgers as an organization because they have built such a juggernaut. And in order to build this type of juggernaut, it does not just take dollars. I think one of the misconceptions about the Dodgers and their organization is they just pay players to come to their organization. And it's not that they just pay players to become part of their organization. They have built an infrastructure from the ground up to be able to help make this team as good as possible. It starts with player development. It starts with player acquisition. It starts with the scouting department. It starts with making sure that you do the little things right that slowly compound itself to a dynasty. They have been doing this for the better part of the last decade and a half, at the very least, since I've been somewhat closely related to the organization as far as my proximity to the Great Lakes Loons. I have seen this organization take leaps and bounds and steps, and we're seeing the fruits of all of that. Well, in order to make this continue, you have to make smart decisions going forward. And the reality is, last offseason, they didn't necessarily make the smartest decisions, or at least the decisions that they decided to make didn't necessarily pay out for them. Meaning that if you look at the numbers in comparison to how much they paid them to the actual production, not necessarily very good for the free agent acquisitions. How can they make better improvements? And I know that's a very tight and seemingly obscure comment, especially after they just won the World Series. But what that is intended to do is make an illustration that this team and this organization and this monster can continue to grow and continue to win championships. And it starts with proper evaluation of your roster. Where do you need improvements, and how do you make it to where the words that Dave Roberts and everybody on stage said today, the goal is not to back-to-back championships. The goal now is a three-peat. How do you make a three-peat possible? It's by starting today, making smart decisions as far as how to make this team as good as possible and not leaving anything uncovered and not leaving anything undervalued. And this is why we here at Dodgers Dogs, even though we do not work for the organization, we don't receive a dime for anything that we do here from the organization, or they barely even recognize us probably. what we do want to do is we want to make sure that the Dodgers are making the smartest decisions because we are fans and we want them to continue to have some success. And I know that's what each one of you guys wants as well as part of this roster. A little bit of a long tangent here to close out the show. I want to thank you guys for all tuning in. You guys have been absolutely unbelievable with the amount of people that have been here. I apologize. There's no way I'm going to be able to get through much of or any of the chats, at least in the actual live portion of the show, being able to talk through that. Here's what I'm going to do with this is I want you guys to leave a comment in the actual comment section of the video. I'm not going to be able to respond to you guys from the actual live chat because there's just no way to be able to do that. I want you guys to actually leave a comment in this video, not just to help out the channel, which it certainly does, but because I want to make sure that I answer any sort of questions that you guys have as far as this. Really would appreciate if you guys did that. It really helps the channel, and I also want to make sure I show my appreciation for each one of you guys. You guys are absolutely amazing and really help support this show. This is not the end of our off-season coverage. In fact, this is just part 1 of the Welcome to the Off-Season video. Part 2 is going to be happening tomorrow night at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be going live, assuming I get out of my small group by then. We're going to be going live at 6 p.m. Pacific, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a quick recap and then diving right into what does the market or potential market actually look for, particularly with some of the outfielders and what is some of the relief pitching, because I think, at least right now, if you were to talk to me about the biggest needs for the Dodgers, I think it's a left-handed hitting outfielder that can hit right-handed pitching, or at least a outfielder that can hit right-handed pitching, and a bullpen option that can get right-handed hitters out. If the Dodgers, at the very least, are able to get those two things done, they're going to have an extraordinary chance at becoming back-to-back World Series champions. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Austin Brubaker. It is a privilege to be able to interact with you guys as part of the show today. Please, if you have any sort of questions or any sort of comments, leave them down in the comment section. I want to interact with you. I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. We will be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific. Enjoy the parade. Continue to celebrate your World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. Until tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Pacific. We will see you guys later. God bless, and go Dodgers.